Before we start, I
Yeah.
just want to convey a small world thing, which is that I think it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, you mentioned on social media that you were looking for somebody to house sit in New Zealand. And I actually communicated with you about possibly taking you up on that, but my schedule didn't allow it.
That's so funny. I didn't recognize your name. I was like trying to place who was. I'll just make sure that my recording's gonna work. Seems like it's doing. Okay, so the recording's fine.
It's recording.
Yeah, we got that conversation captured. That's perfect for posterity's sake. All right. So yesterday we covered a lot of territory, and obviously there's like a million different conversations that we could go down. And we just had a little quick back and forth with Patrick beforehand to try and isolate a couple of topics to spend more time on. And essentially they are, the three that we landed on are stuff about decisions and which groups make what decisions, how do they make them? And onboarding, I heard that come up a bunch of times yesterday. Like, you've got all these new people turning up. What are their expectations? How do they get oriented? And then conflict. So we've prepped just a little bit of material for each of those three things. And
This morning, so.
So that can get the conversation going. And then, yeah, my thought would be today to be much more of everyone talking rather than just us two going blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and we're going to show you about Lumia, that was the intention originally for this one. So we're going to briefly touch on what the Lumia software looks like, what are some of the functionalities that you can use for facilitation, what are some of the decision-making tools, just for you to have an idea.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, we can crack right into that one. And I guess if we aim to spend, you know, half an hour on each section.
I go fast, yeah.
Yeah, I do know. Let's see, I'll get this screen sharing thing going.
Start with the presentation?
Yeah, just, well, yeah. Let's see.
So.
Okay.
So basically, just before we jump into Lumia itself, I'm not sure how many of you know what Lumia is or what it looks like. So I'm just gonna briefly show you around it. So the idea of Lumia is that it's a platform for discussions, but also with the other functionalities that you can make decisions. So you have everything that lives in the same thread. And you can refer always to the kind of decisions that you made in the past. Why did you decide those things? What was the conversation that you were having about it? So what it looks like, the structure of it is your group will have the Lumia group. So that is like a big page where you have all the threads, like it shows on the slide, and you have members that you add into that group. And inside those groups, you can have subgroups as well, and you can have standalone decisions where you can invite other people as well to participate. And then if each subgroup basically behaves as a group as well. So when you go into the subgroup, will be the same structure again. You'll have threads, you have members, you can invite separate members than the ones that you have in your main group. You can have different privacy settings as well. And the only difference is that subgroups cannot have nested subgroups inside of them again. So that's what it is. And then there's also here a design about the thread. So basically the thread has a context, and then you have all the discussion, so everyone can comment. And then you have the decision tools that are shown there, and I'm going to show you what they look like.
Switch over into
Okay, so are you all seeing the Lumia screen now? Yeah, great, awesome. So basically this is what the Lumia group looks like. So we are now on the Lumia Community page, and you can see like this is the group description, and here you can see the privacy settings. So this means that this group is closed, so people can find it, but they cannot comment or participate or see the threads. You can change those settings to be private as well. So it means that only people that you invite will be able to find the group and see the threads, or it could be completely open, that we have other groups that are like that are more It's open to anyone that can find it online, and they can read the threads and they can see who the members are. So here on the side, you have the card for all the members. The people that have the orange arrow around them is, those are the coordinators of the group. Well, basically, we have everyone from our co-op being the coordinators. And then if you notice on the description, we have links to other important threads or groups, because we have also a community in Spanish that we manage. And then we have what are important subgroups that you need to know of. And importantly, we have a moderation policy and our decision-making protocols as well. And normally, we will have as well who's the coordinator of this group, if it was only one or two coordinators. But in this case, because we have many, we don't name them. But it's pretty useful to have who's the coordinator and how can people contact them, just in case that they have any issues. So under that, you'll see all the threads that are happening. That these ones that have like those colors is because there's a poll in that thread that is open. Here you're going to see all the subgroups that we have. Some of them will be private or secret in a way, so they won't be listed here because it's only by invites. Then extra to that, you can see all the attachments that have been done in the group. You can see all the previous decisions. And then there's tags as well as a new other thing. So
let's go and jump into that one.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are you able to make privacy options with the threads themselves?
In some cases you can, depends on the privacy of the whole group. You can have some public threads or you can have some closed threads as well.
And there's a whole brand new stack of functionality that rolled out this week, so
yesterday.
we're not fully up to speed
Yeah.
with it, but
Awesome.
basically allows you to have different participants in each thread. So you can, like, for instance, if you had two different subgroups that were working separately, you can bring them together for one thread if necessary, or you can bring totally external people in for just the one thread and not give them access to the whole group.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you a thread. So basically, it's kind of the same structure where you have the context up here, then you have proposals on the side. Sorry, it's a bit slow, the computer. So in this case, there's a poll that is open where you can see how it functions. So there's a bunch of options that people can choose and they can vote. And then you're going to see all the comments, the nested comments for the replies. Let's see if there's some of the votes that show here. Maybe that's not the important bit. So here, anyone can add a comment. You can attach documents. You can add emojis, like the normal things. And we use Markdown for formatting. And let's see. So these are the other decision tools that we have. Sorry. So a proposal is basically to seek agreement. So it's, I'll try to find one where I can show you. And basically it's the normal pie chart that you might have seen where people can vote for I agree, I abstain, I disagree, or I block. There are tools that come from consensus decision making, but they can be used depending to what are your group needs. How do you make agreements in your group? What decisions mean to you is how you're going to use those buttons. Then there's a check that is just like tracking participation. So it's like you can say yes or no. We use it a lot for prepping for meetings, for example. You're going to see that we're going to show you a workflow again. And basically we say, have you read the documents and you're ready to come to the meeting? Yes or no? Done. Or are you going to come tomorrow to the event? Yes or no? Great. Then there's a poll. It's a normal one. Is you can offer different choices and people can vote on them, or people can also add extra choices. That is the one that is open in this thread. There's a dot vote that is basically, I don't know if you all know about this one, but basically there's a few options and you give a number of dots or votes to each participant, and then they can allocate those votes in a different way with the options that they have. It's to prioritize. Then there's a time poll that is basically like a doodle. So it's just to find a time to meet. And then there's rank choices. That is also another way to prioritize different options.
Can you elaborate on how that dot vote, like a scenario that dot vote would be used, and how it's different than the rank choice?
Yeah. So basically, in the rank choice, what you'll use is you choose which one goes first, right? Like, what is your preferred option? You're gonna position it in the number in the first part, and then you're gonna choose one for the second and third, and in that order. While dot vote, let's say I give you 3 dots to vote, and you choose to put them all in one, or you separate those 3 votes in 3 different options. That means that the 3 of them are important to you. It's not that one has a priority more than the others, but depending on how everyone else votes, is that priority is going to emerge instead of coming directly from which one do you think is the best. We'll find that priority among all of us.
It's especially good for when you have a limited resource and you want to distribute. And so like you can do it as a budgeting thing. So say each dot is worth $100. You've each got 10 dots to allocate. Where would you put the money across these options?
Yeah, I can show you more. Let's see. There's a lot of groups. So in the side here, what I'm scrolling through is all the groups that Richard, in this case, is a part of.
You want the HQSC one?
Yeah, I want the HQSC one.
It's up to that.
Yeah, of course. So recently we ran a training with a group. So I can show you this one. Our internet is a bit slow. Sorry about that. So here we go.
Although that proposal will have closed by now.
Yes, it is, but just want to show what it looks like. So here is how, this is the result that came out of what people voted on. So each one distributed those votes, and this is what it happened. So the proposal is closed, but you can see here where people put their dots and what happened at the end. I wonder if we can show you any other. So basically, this is the main frame for Lumia, where the decisions live, where the threads are, where do you invite your group, your members. Up here is your profile picture, all the tools. You can choose different profile details, or you can choose different email settings. You can contact us, and you can find the help. Here on the side is where all your groups live. Groups and subgroups, you usually won't have this many. And then you have the unread threads, that is all the threads that you haven't seen the new information from all the groups that you're a part of. You can also mute threads if they're not important to you, and you can find also just the decisions. And this is good because you can start a new decision. That means that it's not attached to any group or any thread. It's just a standalone one, and you can invite people to participate. People from, maybe they're not part of your group, they're from anywhere, and they don't even need to be logged into Lumia to vote. They can just vote and participate on their own. So this is what a time poll will look like. And this is a check, and that's the proposal. That's the pie chart that I was mentioning. And and that shows how he voted. So he's the one that abstained.
We just got to be careful not to go into these because
no, we're not going to go into those. I'm not going to show the details. I'm just showing what it looks like. So that's pretty much the basics of Lumia. We're not going to go too much more in detail, but we can if you have any particular questions. And if not, we're going to show you.
What's that facilitation?
Yeah. So.
And this.
Here we go. So first, let's check. Is there anyone that has any questions so far? You can speak because I can't see you. I'm sharing the screen.
No, we can continue forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so this is basically some of the tools that we use for facilitation. Some of the we call them hosting skills. So it's basically make sure that when you invite people into your group, they know exactly what they're there for, what is asked of them when they come into it. So have the context of your group be very clear, have all the information that people need. Same with a thread or same with a proposal. Make sure that they know what is asked of them and all the information that they need to participate is there. Then the idea is that you can support everyone to participate. So if you hear that, or if you see that there's not many people that are joining into your thread or they're not commenting or things like that, then you can just check with them. What we notice a lot, probably is not the case with your group because you're all pretty much tech savvy, but we know that there's a lot of people that they're not very comfortable with the technology, and instead of saying that because they're ashamed of it, they just don't participate or they're against the tool just because. And it's like, well, there's something else going on. So as the facilitator of the group or the coordinator, it's kind of your job as well to make sure that they are supported, that they know how to press all the buttons and they're comfortable using it. Then basically what we do in the thread, so this is a thread, and you start with a discussion. You have the context, you have the data, an invitation to participate, that it could be a particular question. And as it's happening, again, like if you notice that there's a lot of people that are not participating, you can mention them. So if you start writing, you put @ and you start writing the name of that person, Lumia is going to give you a list of all the participants of the group that have that name, and you can choose the person that you want to mention. That means that they're going to be sent an email directly saying, hey, this person is mentioning you in the thread, and that means that you're needed there. So basically, you might know the convergence and divergence style of discussions. So basically, the divergence is when you start having a discussion, you bring all the different options, you talk about many things, and then there's a point where you want to start converging into one point and making a decision. So as a facilitator, that's your job kind of as well, to be able to make sure that that conversation doesn't just go forever, just as we're just talking about something, but that you're going to make a decision. So that's how we use our facilitation, our decision-making tools. As you can start a poll, you can start a check, you can start one of the dot votes, just to check that you're all on the same page, that you know what you're talking about, that all the options are on the table, and you can start zooming into one of those options to make a decision. So another thing is what we always say is start small, right? So when you bring in new people into your tool and you might be super excited on how to use it. You're like, yeah, I'm just going to use it for everything. And you start 20 different threads with 5 million different proposals on the same group, and people get a bit overwhelmed because first they never use the tool, then they arrive and there's all this information that they need to be paying attention to. So we always say choose one thing that you want to use it for to start with and get used to it. And once you get used to it, and then people created that habit, as we were talking yesterday, the habit to use that new tool, then you can start incorporating different uses for it. There's a lot of material about how to do bunch of facilitation on the Lumia School. It's on this thread, it's lumia.school. So you can always jump on there.
Can I leave it there? I'll just show a couple of other pieces.
Great. Some workflows.
Well, just specifically how to structure the groups, like, because I think that'll be probably a useful place to open the conversation, and then what sort of decision styles in each group. So this example is within our Lumio. This is how Lumio uses Lumio. This is a partial list of all the subgroups that we use, and well, the important thing is there's someone in charge of each group. So in charge, facilitating, paying attention to, responsible for. They're the person that if you've got a question that you're stuck with, or if you're trying to get a decision made and it's not making any progress, that group facilitator will be the person you turn to and say, hey, we're stuck here, can we get a hand? Or there's some problematic behavior in this community group.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How did you come about segmenting your groups like this? Like, is it by influence? Like, why did you choose these to be the groups modeled in?
In our case, it was a lot of a lot of change over a lot of time, and it got really chaotic. And what we settled into eventually was basically, and as part of our quarterly planning process, every 3 months, we'd check in, like, these are the teams that we've got. Are they the right teams for the coming quarter? So once we'd agreed, what are the objectives we're trying to deliver on, what are the resources we have to do it with, then we would reorganize our group structure. And it basically settled into 80% of the structure stayed the same each quarter, and 20% would change. So it was like a manageable amount of change, like that we're actually adapting, but not complete chaos all the time. So this set kind of standardized over, really took years before we settled down and stopped changing everything all the time.
It still always changes a little bit with each quarter.
I've got a comment on that.
Yeah.
Mike has a comment.
Yeah, I would say as well that we also figured that actually having a group where putting more information, actually being more open and transparent. So like our workers group, that we have a few more people in there, so they can see what's actually happening, even if they're not engaging on the day-to-day work. And the other thing is the kind of decisions that we make. So the board, are very different kinds of discussions and decisions from members, which have a different group, which is different from the workers.
Yeah.
So it helps us to keep in context where we know kind of what hat we're wearing if we're in different roles.
Yeah.
And as I was saying, for the different subgroups, you can set different privacy settings. So for example, the board one, it's a secret one or a private group. So as a member, I could access it if I want to, but actually I don't need to, because that's up for the board to figure those things out. While for me, it's more important to be checking the workers one. That is where all the job, the daily stuff is happening. And also for the board, they're not interested in reading all the details of everything that is going on every day. So that's how we make a bit of that distinction.
I wanted to point out as well this column, the idea that in some of these groups we're making binding decisions. So the co-op members, in our case, the co-op members, they're the ultimate responsibility. So any important decision that goes through there is a binding decision. That's like, we could change the constitution in that group. Whereas, say, in the accessibility group, where we have people with visual impairments that are working with our developers, like, that's not a binding decision-making group. They make recommendations. And having that really, really clear, that'll be part of the context of the group. Like, when you arrive, it says, welcome to this group. This is what we're doing here. Any proposal in this group is binding, or this is just a consultation group. We're just looking for your recommendations. We're looking for your input, or we're just going to do reporting in here, and actually all the decisions are switched off. So we have it's hugely important to just manage people's expectations and let them know what's expected of them when they get there.
Those are the kind of things that you will put in the context of the group. You could link it to an external document where it says, like this one, for example, what is happening in each group and what is expected of them.
The other piece I want to show before we open the floor is this is Inspiral's decision-making agreement. Well, it's part of it. So you can see here we've defined 4 different kinds of decisions: standard, significant, quorum, and emergency. And they've got different criteria for each one. And this precise set of agreements is not exactly the right one for you to cut and paste, but the idea that you have a range of different decisions that have different thresholds. So whether that's how much time you've got to give them, or what fraction of your community have to participate before it becomes valid, or how many, what happens if there's a block or if there's a disagreement. It takes quite a bit of effort to hash out this kind of set of protocols in a way that people are happy to proceed. But once you've got it, clarifies things a lot, and you can potentially move a lot faster. So yeah, that's once again a big download of context from us. I'm going to switch off my screen and hear what's going on and how this might apply in our chain context.
Yeah, so first of all, is that Inspiral Handbook public?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll drop that.
Cool, we can reference that later. And then I noticed that in that matrix you had like the workers with the facilitator. I'm assuming that there's subgroups of different working groups that are task oriented. Mm-hmm. How are you guys, like, what is that workers group or the facilitator in that, and how do they interface with the other working groups? Like, what is a binding decision for the facilitator of the workers group that affects the subgroups? Does that make sense? In
our case, the way that our co-op's structured. So remember yesterday I said we distinguish between participation and commitment. So workers are all of our participants. Like, if you're involved, you're getting involved. Like, we are going to involve you as much as we can in the decision making, but we acknowledge that if you're not committed, you have a different mindset, you know. So like if you just turned up 2 months ago, like you probably don't have the same context as other people. So we have like in our 90-day planning process, for instance, we will invite all the workers to participate in setting our 90-day objectives. But at the end of it, it's actually a member decision. So that's a smaller group of people. It's people that have been around for a long time and are committed for the future. So we'll distinguish like we'll make it really clear, like in the invitation, workers, we want to hear what you have to say, and it's a member decision that's going to get made in the end. And actually, in that case, that decision will have to go to the board, and then the board ratifies it. So it's like the members say, this is what we want to do. Board, do you think it's a good idea? So there's this kind of like dual bodies of power checking each other out and testing each other's thinking. And sometimes board decisions go to the co-op and vice versa.
Just one other thing I'd add too, we also set up from time to time employment panels. Mm-hmm. So that's a much smaller group of just a couple of people. So a decision coming out of for example, out of a 90-day plan about resourcing, goes to the board and members for approval. Then may come to an employment panel group to actually execute on and make the decisions around particular employment issues.
And that panel might be, someone who has broad experience in hiring, and then someone who's like specifically going to be in somewhat like a management role in that domain of work, and maybe one or two of the team members that they're going to be working alongside as well. So you kind of dynamically pull together a good set of people. And this took us some time to get there, where originally it was like, oh, everyone is involved in every decision, which it's a natural place to start, but it doesn't last for very long. And then we said, okay, well, we want to delegate some decisions. Who's a good set of people to make, okay, we need a new engineer. Well, who's a good person to ask about this new engineering hire? We don't need everyone, but let's get these 3 or 4 people we trust, and they can go and do it. Sometimes we'll set it up like a subgroup might make a recommendation and then come back to the wider group to check. Like, we've done the research, this is what we think, we just wanted to check with you before we went ahead. Like, sometimes it will flow that way as well.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to review that. So what about like, how do you guys play around with the visibility of the decision making as it's happening? Like, so for example, in our debrief today, one of our directors, Kenny Rowe, was like, our board is going to make it a point to be more visible to the community. Like, I wanted to, like, that's a direct, task that he's working on. How do you guys manage that visibility with the board? Because obviously all the decisions can't be public, but like, so can you speak to that a little bit?
We'll probably, in that case, like normally we know what are the decisions because we have coordinators, and they go to the board, they take the decisions that the members did, like, do you ratify this or not? What do you think? And then it takes any recommendations back into the members. So in the case of Lumia, you can also move threads and decisions around. So let's say you made a decision in one subgroup and you want everyone else like, oh, this is great. We want everyone else to hear what's going on, or we want them to know about this discussion, what's been happening. So you can move that into a different group to have a different visibility about it. And then I could recommend as well, you can start a notice board, some sort of notice board in a group, and it's where you put in the input again from what's going on in the other subgroups, what's happening with the decision making, things that are important for people to know. You can pass them into there for them to know what they're up to.
For me, I think a big recurring theme of like trying to do decentralized organizing is about involving the right people at the right time and summarizing, like really having someone whose job it is to be an internal reporter, and having this reliable stream of information where it's like once a week, all the important stuff is going to get summarized into a newsletter, or once a month, whatever it is. And there's, you're managing people's attention, because you just swamp people with attention. Once you remove the hierarchy, say everyone gets drowned in information. So there needs to be a reliable channel where we know the important stuff is going to be on top.
Yeah, I'd add my 2 cents in as well. I think what we've seen from the board perspective and sitting, across the board into the workers and the members, what we typically do is take the minutes or the output of the board and then repost that into the members thread, into the members group, so that members can be updated and kept and then asked questions. But the other thing to consider as well is the permission and the ability to actually have genuine conversations in groups. Sometimes, a group can be constrained if it feels like anything it says is going to be made public, or at least a wider sense. So some real sensitivity needs to be put around that to encourage both genuine engagement and real decision making, and the opportunity to have the hard conversations when they're needed, as at the same time providing an appropriate level of transparency and sharing of what's going on to a wider team.
So thank you for that. So would you, thinking about modeling that in Lumia, would you, let's just say marketing, for example, because I'm involved in that, and we need to make a private decision and there's public decisions, would you have two separate groups for that? Or how do you necessarily model that? Would you move a thread from, the private group where we're discussing internal things, move it to public for feedback, or would you create a separate decision in the public? How do you manage that process of switching between, inviting this genuine engagement in a private setting, but also collecting the feedback from the public?
You could definitely start at least two different threads and proposals. If you really need to have a marketing that is a private group, because there's going to be more sensitive information, then I'll keep that one private and then have a more wider group, a wider group where you have potentially everyone that is working at our chain, and you have in that one say, hey, this is what's going on with marketing. Maybe there's one thread that says marketing newsletter or something like that, and you put all the details there, and you can start things like polls or checks or things to get them to get everyone engaged and get a little bit of feedback to take back again into marketing. And I'll say that the person that will be in charge of that will be the facilitator or the coordinator of the marketing group, or you can have a couple of people depending on how big your group is, that their task is to be reporting between the groups.
Yes, that internal communications role.
Yeah.
I would add, you could use tags as well in a wider group. You could have a tag called marketing, so people can clearly see which threads are related to that, and find those. I'd suggest larger groups and then small working groups. Yeah. As a kind of a good combination. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Let me do one more follow-up question, and then let's get hopefully let other people have some questions too. But so when you said that it's important to have managing people's attention and summarizing that, do you guys use one rolled, one tasked internal communications person that's curating all this content, or what is your process for aggregating that actual content?
We have a coordination team, and so usually there's two or three of us, and each of us is looking after one domain. So I'm looking at product, you're looking at community, you're looking at the structure and governance and that stuff, and
stuff.
we each of us kind of know what's going on in our department in a lot of detail, and we're drawing out all of the updates from our people, and then we'll get together and summarize everything into okay, what's the one page for this week?
Coordinator's report.
Yeah.
And there's the other thing we'll do is, so in the marketing context, there's a marketing subgroup that's going and it's busy and it's doing all its work. And then in the main workers group, there's a marketing updates thread. So it's just one thread where every time we have a meeting, we post that comment. And so if you really are hungry, you can go and get all the details. The information is available, but we're not trying to make it too loud.
Flooding people and stuff.
Yeah. So you have a thread or a group just dedicated to updates?
Just one thread.
It's a thread.
Yeah. Okay. So each time we have a meeting, there'll be a new comment that goes in, hey, here's our notes if you care about it.
Okay. All right. Okay. And that's a thread within marketing, right?
That's a thread within the main workers group.
Within the main workers group. Okay. Okay. Cool. Does all this is super valuable. I could probably keep asking questions, but maybe there's some other people that have some questions.
Anyone else wants to ask anything?
Well, everyone's muted. So.
Twice. 3 times.
You go then.
Okay. Yeah. I know that you guys also mentioned that you use Kumu for mapping out the comms tools. Do you use it for any other mapping of the organization, or like you mentioned yesterday that visualization is super important. So what are the like? Can you speak to like how you go about visualizing these types of things?
Yeah. Basically, I think it's a really hard problem. This is all about onboarding and keeping people oriented to change. At a small scale, so like within Lumio, it's been reasonably easy for me. Like every 6 months or something, I'll just draw a new map. Like here's our new org chart, or these are our objectives, or something like that. That at that level, it's easy enough for me as one person to get context on 10 people and draw a cool picture, and people are like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. But at the broader scale of Inspiral, which is really like, I think at the same sort of scale that you're heading towards, where you got just lots of different activities going on, and plenty of places where there's some people down here that just don't have any context about the other people over there. That job of mapping is, we haven't really cracked it. We haven't fully got a stable pattern that I'm like, yeah, we can totally do that. We've started some experimentation with Kumu, and I can send you a document that I wrote about the actual specific implementation. But the idea is I wanted to have a map of all of the participants in Inspiral. There's 250 people on this chart, and categorize them by what are their interests, what areas are they active in, and have it set up in a way that any of them can edit their own profile without having any logins. That was sort of my objective. Was I want this to be super, super simple. There's a bunch of different social network mapping tools, and they all fail as far as I've seen, because keeping the information up to date is just like an unsolved problem. How do you incentivize people to keep their stuff up to date? Like, I don't know how to do it. But at least I've come up with the software layer that makes it as friction-free as possible, but still I don't know how to get the incentives to keep people up to date. It's like new people are incentivized because they're really hungry, but all of the old hands, they're really busy and they're getting stuff done, and they're like, why would I, that's not the most important thing for me to do right now. I'm not going to update the map. So it's a sticky one. But yeah, when I was thinking about what to share on the topic of onboarding, it was all documentation, visualization. There's a tool called Maptio. I can drop in a link to that too. I'll send you a couple of links after this. But Maptio is for, what do they call it? Initiative mapping. So you can define, okay, there's this initiative called marketing, and Patrick's holding that one. And then within that, there's an initiative called new website. And within that, there's, like testing, and you just have one person assigned as the ultimately responsible party for each initiative. Again, it could be helpful. It's made by some people that really are values aligned, they have the same kind of attitude to organizing as we do. So I haven't tried it in practice yet, but I trust the people and the software looks cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to get both of those links. I think if you guys don't mind, if we could jump into the onboarding, your guys' thoughts on onboarding and some of the processes and methodologies, or just insight in general that you have.
Yeah.
Do you have some slides for that?
I have one slide, but I don't even need it. It's just
okay, cool.
But the basic thing is, you'll notice that Lumio, Inspiral, Genie, all the cool new decentralized organizations, they really put a lot of effort into their handbooks. That means first getting clear on what is actually happening around here, and then publishing it, and making it a transparent resource, and making it, we've all been using Gitbooks to do this. Gitbooks has just completely changed, so I don't know if it's still good, but it has been really good. Which the idea being that it's a relatively low barrier for anyone to edit the book, like wiki style, a slightly more managed wiki, and an expectation that we have to help each other get oriented. And this is our canonical source of truth that all the newbies are going to look at when they arrive. and they're going to, I mean, even help to test if they're interested in joining or not. So yeah, we've always in other teams that I've worked in, there's always been at least one person who's quite fanatical about keeping that book up to date. I'm the one for Lumia, and it really, yeah, it really helps, especially when you have these recurring questions come up all the time. It's like, well, either it's in the handbook or we don't know the answer, and if we don't know the answer, we need to have a conversation about it. Yeah, doing these visualization things really, really help. Just notice the level of engagement compared to having a document. Like, it's the same information, but when you lay it out visually for people, they just are much, yeah, it's much less daunting, you know, when you see a map rather than when you see this long list of text. The other thing that we've had some degree of success on with Inspiral is when we've got a lot of people coming, we group them into cohorts. And so it's like all the newbies for September are in one group, and they get to know each other and they see each other. And there's one of the older hands, one of the people with a lot of context will be kind of holding that cohort. Okay, let's check in once a week and see how you're going, get to know each other. I can make introductions. That's a huge part of it. You know, these networks are managed by relationships. And so if there's someone who can help you navigate, like, oh, Patrick's really good on this topic and Bill's really good on that topic, and make those introductions, that really helps. We've done challenges. So like a checklist, once you've completed these 10 tasks, then you're basically a world-class beginner, you know, like you know enough to make your way around. So it's like, yeah, update the handbook, have a conversation with 3 of the old hands, raise your first Lumia decision, whatever it is, like a list of, you know, gamify it sort of thing. We have, do you want to talk about the steward side?
Yeah, so basically as well, another point of contact for new people is their steward. So what I was talking about yesterday, this peer support that we generate. So every new person that enters in the network or in the group will have a support person. So that's the people that they can, you know, check in with and be like, hey, I'm a bit lost. I don't know where to find this stuff. Or, hey, I don't know which tool to sign in into first. What is the most important thing I should be paying attention to? So they have a person that can guide them along.
So how do you actually how do you actually make that pairing? Like, what defines a steward? And like, when like, is it a mandate? Like, what is,
So, as we set it up, is we have a working group that is in charge of that. So we call it a well working group. I think it's the stewarding group in Inspiral. It just changes depending, but the idea is that group is the one in charge of making those connections and reshuffling them as well, because we kind of around every year we reshuffle those connections just to produce new meetings in the group and not have those cliquey relationships. So that group is the one in charge of doing it. In general, it is a little bit random, but you could also first check with each person, be like, hey, we're thinking on assigning you this person. Are you okay with that? Because, you know, it could be that there's some tension or some conflict and you don't want to be like stepping on people's toes. So basically, we just check with everyone. Is everyone okay with these relationships? Yeah, okay, we'll go with that, and we'll keep them there.
Also, in the stewarding relationship for onboarding is actually quite different from a long-term relationship. So we've had at Inspiral, we've had kind of like a group of volunteers who are happy to be the kind of greeters. You know, like, I'm happy to answer newbie questions for a year. Send them my way. We'll have, you know, there might be 10 of those that are up for taking on newbies, which is quite different from an ongoing support person.
Yeah, but in general, we'll have older, like maybe the older members will have, or the people that have been in the group the most, will have maybe a few relationships that they're taking care of, like a few people that they're stewarding, and then the new people won't have anyone that they're stewarding until they become a little bit more experienced and they have a bit more context and they understand how it moves. And then we'll assign them someone else.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you navigate the group to be willing to ask for the help and be willing to accept the help in the beginning when you're wanting to, you know, introduce these kind of concepts and these tools to the membership body?
Well, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
a lot of that is cultural, right? That there's a bunch of stuff we take for granted being in New Zealand. We have quite a different set of cultural assumptions than like when we're in the States, for instance. Like people just operate on different frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it you have to like draw out and make much more explicit. We did a training a couple of months ago, which was actually purely about help, asking for help, noticing the different kinds of help there are, you know. So like when you say, we had this whole session. It was like, let's say you ask for help. I need someone to help me move my sofa. That's not a very specific request. And so think about all the different kinds of ways that request could be filled. You know, like someone could come over to your house with a pickup truck. Someone could give you advice on good ways to move. You know, there's all these different ways that people could respond to your ask. And so a lot of the workshop was just about get more specific about the types of help that exist and which one you're after, because a lot of people's frustration is they've asked for help and they've got the thing that they didn't want. You know, they had someone come in and just treat them like a kid, or, you know, whatever. They weren't specific enough in the request, so they weren't satisfied with how it was answered.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a practice run. We had a room full of 40 people, and we spent a minute looking around the room and going, find someone in this room that you want help from on any topic, and write it down on a piece of paper, and just go like this until you find someone who's like willing to say yes and give you that help. So I found someone who's going to illustrate my blog post, you know, like, and just got into that practice and made it more normal, paid attention to it.
Was that, did that answer your question, William? Or something more specific you were after?
Well, because I really like the tools that I'm seeing. I'm just imagining, you know, how you would launch such a tool to a group. You know, I think our chain's currently around 1,500. Mm-hmm. You know, in terms of membership, right? The active membership is smaller than that, but still, you've got to, you know, introduce something like this to say, hey, look, this is going to be helpful and beneficial to the group. And now, granted, you know, the preface here is I'm still like 5 weeks into all of this, okay? But I can say I've heard or witnessed or seen enough of where people don't want, there's certain people that don't want to take direction. They don't want to be managed. They don't want to sniff anything that sounds like it's going to be centralized. So like when you showed your chart showing that, which to me denotes, you know, a more mature organization, okay, in terms of some of the structure that you have, but you have decision making there, and you had the word binding on it, yeah. Right? And I could see some people are just not going to go for that. It's like, wait a minute, everything's supposed to be in flux all the time within the co-op, and you know, there was some conversation this morning about a program that the co-op has, and there was a decision made earlier in April that the board had made, but yet you could tell from the ensuing parts of the conversation that went on, it's like, okay, they're not really going to listen to that. You know, they're going to continue with this other new idea that they have and see where they can take it. So they're not really wanting to listen to the binding decision that appeared that the board had already made. Yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering, you know, okay, this looks like a really good idea, but how do you navigate the waters to introduce something like this to such a group that's, again, to me and where I stand, isn't yet matured to your point at Lumia? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about it. So one thing is, as we were mentioning yesterday, any kind of tool, even if it's what we call a cultural tool or a social tool, is still something that you need to introduce to the group. So one of the things is, how do you introduce that in a way that it's more of a shared decision and not just, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Yeah. I know the best answer and we're going to do this now. It's more about, hey, I'm seeing that there's a problem and I think that maybe this thing could help us. What do everyone else think? There's a great phrase that says, people don't resist change, they resist change done to them. So for us, it's very important to include everyone in making those decisions. Like, how do we want to be together? You know, what kind of culture do we want to have? What kind of tools do we want? What kind of system? How are our decisions? Just include everyone in at least participating in that conversation, and then having some recommendations that come maybe from the board, or maybe from HR, or maybe from the internal communications. Just say, hey, well, we heard you all, and this is what we decided that we're going to try. Run it as an experiment.
Totally.
Run it as an experiment for maybe a few months, see what happens. Have someone that is in charge of that experiment, that it could be leading people on, trying to make sure that people are engaged, and then check back after that time and say, hey, we tried this stewardship system for 4 months. How did it go? Are people okay with it? Is there anything that we need to change? Do we need to set up something new? So for me, it's very important, especially in these kind of organizations, that everyone is on board of what you're trying to do, because if not, you get that, like, I don't want you to tell me what to do. I'm going to do whatever I want. So it's navigating that space.
Okay, great.
That experimental time frame really loosens people up for trying new things. If they know you're making a reversible change, like, we're starting to feel the pain of involving everyone and everything all the time. How about we try delegating such and such decisions on this process? But I think people need to feel the pain of it before they're willing. You know, we're all bringing our particular psychologies of like why we're hung up about centralization in the first place. So you got to kind of tread carefully with that.
Right.
I would just add that, that two phrase, there's a little bit of languaging going on there. We've noticed that in the early days as a startup, almost everything is experimental and is running. But as you move on, some things become operational. They become the kind of things that we're beginning to settle on, and their repeatable behavior. And so maybe calling, the difference between what is an experiment and what is turning into operation behavior. And that's not to say that operations, stay forever. I mean, they definitely need to change and need to improve for scale and a lot of other reasons. But rather than just making a shift in the operation, we keep running with the operations and then set up an experiment to test what will be an improvement over that operation.
I've got a couple more things to add. This just keeps happening. One is to say some people don't fit, and there needs to be a way to identify when someone is actually not just that they don't fit, but they're not willing to change, and that, it's a really hard job, but there needs to be someone in a leadership role that can make that call and remove those people. Like you can't design a system that's immune to narcissists or psychopaths. That you just can't. You just have to get rid of them.
Yeah, and that's true of every organization. Yeah.
Another thing is scale. And if you're thinking about 1,500 people, if I was thinking about 1,500 people, I would kind of go into a fit and just fall on the floor. But instead, if you think about where's a natural size of, like, maybe you've got 20 people that work together on some particular project, and then practice delegating, from that 20 down to 3, and demonstrating to people like, hey, we've started using this process and it's been really great, and attract people to it rather than pushing. We've got another metaphor. In New Zealand, this is a sheep metaphor. In New Zealand, we keep our sheep together with fences. So, you can't cross the fence. Whereas in Australia, because they're mostly a desert, they keep their sheep together with watering holes. So there's no fence, but because there's something attracting them, they all come together anyway. So in this kind of organizational design, you want to think more like watering holes and less like fences. Like, what are people going to be attracted to?
Yeah. Does Lumio have other organizations that are of, a membership size of 1,500 or even greater?
That are using Lumio?
Yes.
Yeah. We have plenty of really big organizations.
Okay.
Probably I'm just thinking about Podemos is the closest one. So there was this massive social movement in Spain, 2014, and they had 2,000 separate Lumia groups and like 50,000 people or something. And no one in charge, like all those 2,000 groups were started by 2,000 different people. So they were getting some degree of coherence from Lumio. Obviously not, it wasn't like a stable, well-structured.
And I just, while I got the ear at the moment, so I really liked your cohorts, your newbie groups, and how you went about that. Do you, is the detail of that something you're willing to share more of to our chain, or?
Yeah, I'll see what I can find. I'm not sure how it's documented.
Okay. I mean, anything else in terms of like that you found that is working in best practices? Because obviously you do these presentations in front of a lot of different co-ops, right? And so you have these relationships with these people, and so I imagine that you're seeing, okay, we're finding that these best practices are working for similar groups like what you have.
Yeah, we're holding the relationships with as many people as we can that are on this frontier of organizing, and like the stuff we presented yesterday is like the best guess at, like I said, these are the frequently asked questions, or these are the best practices that are coming through, and then that coupled with what we're publishing through blogging as well. But it is so context specific, it's like I feel pretty confident to add some value in just about any organizational challenge, but we need to have a conversation. I need to figure out what your language is and what context you're coming from, and how to tweak it all. So I think on that though, maybe more practical than just talking to me all the time, is what's made a huge difference for us in Lumio is being in the community of Inspiral, where you have other folks, like literally across the room, there's other founders over there that are doing their own thing, but they're part of this bigger thing called Inspiral. And so we have peers that we can turn to and learn. We're learning together, but we're not like intimately involved in each other's work. So we've got that kind of objectivity. That's made a huge difference. So just like making sure you're in a network of other, peers that you respect that are also trying to do similarly difficult things. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, most of them are in blockchain space in the US, so you've got a good reason to make friends with them anyway.
We're at the 1 hour mark. I think we have half an hour left. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that some of the questions that are coming in via chat here are addressed or discussed before we part ways for the day. So Ian was asking about capability for anonymous voting within Lumio, member privacy settings, and security overall.
Yeah. So in terms of the security of the platform itself, probably Rich or Michael can tell you more. In terms of privacy settings for the groups is, as I mentioned before, so you can have open groups, you can have closed group, and you can have private groups. So those are 3 different tiers. There's a hand up over here.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about privacy preferences for individuals, and also if there have been any third-party or independent security certifications done on your platform. Yeah. And a last question. So when you were talking about Podemos, you have a lot of people using your platform, but it sounds like they're spread apart in many groups. Whereas from what it sounds like, Patrick is looking to put the entire membership of our chain onto a Lumia platform, or what are you trying to figure out what the plan is here?
Yeah, so my intention was to figure out how to, or to get good ideas on modeling some of our decentralized organization processes, whether that be through Lumio or other tools. I think that they have, a wealth of experience with best practices. So it's not necessarily like migrate everybody to Lumio. And I was actually, I also had a follow-up question that was related to that point about like, how do you navigate people that want to use this tool for this solution, this tool for this solution? It's good enough, but it's good enough for each group, but what dictates what gets moved to the next phase, if that makes sense? Like for example, let's say we want to use, GitHub. There's an independent initiative for a wiki in GitHub, and there's an independent initiative for a wiki in WordPress or something like that. Like how do you navigate the concurrent type of tool usage? Does that make sense? It wasn't fully formed yet, but
I don't know. There's a new shiny tool every other day. Lumio is fantastic, and it seems that these guys especially have some experience in herding, whether from the New Zealand or Australian perspective. So herding thousands of members onto particular platforms is quite challenging.
Yeah.
I'm more interested right now really in the best practices and the policies and procedures, and for the Lumio tool itself, finding good applications within our chain and looking at the security-wise, since our chain sometimes our decisions are pretty high stakes and we have to avoid them being gamed. Sometimes we might need anonymous voting. Where the tool can fit in our decision making.
Yeah, sure. Should I answer
the
the security question? Yeah. So Lumio.org. So first of all, Lumio is open source software. So and it's constantly being looked at by people and checking. So you can have confidence, if you like, in the actual integrity of the software. That there's not like things happening in the background. You can see it, it's visible and transparent. Secondly, we run the Lumio.org instance that you're probably using right now, which is a shared database managed by Heroku in the US, running on Amazon Web Services. And that's all like ISO 20, I can give all the numbers and all the rest of it, but it's a certified data center. We've had security checks done by New Zealand government and a couple of others that have done, and they've done penetration testing. They've done. We've had to answer lots of cloud security questions, and we pass. So it's good to know.
There's been multiple government departments there.
Yeah. So we're approved for use by the New Zealand Department of Internal Affairs, which is not an easy thing to get approval for. Having said that, the data it's in a shared data and under Lumia.org. So over the last sort of 8 to 9 months, we've been offering a private hosted version of Lumio. And so that's something that if you're looking for extra security, that's where you have your own private database, which is not sitting on a server, which is also sharing with others. So we have pretty tight controls over. It's not like you're about to see the data of somebody else's, but if you're looking for a private host and you're looking at on a set of secure servers that you feel may be better than the Heroku Amazon service, then that can be done too.
There was a question though about anonymous voting. So in every proposal, you can ask the person starting the proposal. You can say if you want to have people to vote anonymously or not. So that's a functionality.
I was going to put a little flag on that one though. That anonymous voting we haven't tested it with high stakes. So it's at a very surface level. At least there's no names being shown, but I'm not sure. If you're really concerned about anonymity, I'm not sure if it's robust enough. And this is we're in another side conversation. We're looking at how Lumio and our chain can play together in software terms, and I think that would be one place to explore. I wanted to bring another best practice thing. This comes from social movements, and it seems to apply in these kind of organizations too. What they call the 1-9-90 rule. And so, like in our chain, maybe you've got 1,500 people in the broader membership. If you think about maybe 1% of them might be on the board, 9% of them might be paying attention every day, and 90% of them are kind of around, but you can't count on them. So put those 90% on Discord and put the 1 and the 9 on Lumio, basically. And don't even necessarily put them there, but just start. I'm in another group that has, it's like 600 people in a co-op in the UK, and everyone's invited to join the Lumio, and about 30% of the people take up the invitation. It's who really wants to go to that depth.
And again, for deciding on the tools, again, I'll just reiterate what we said before. It's about deciding what tool you're going to use together, because there's a problem that you want to solve together. So it's like you make that decision instead of being excited about this new shiny technology that came up and someone's like, yeah, I'm just going to start using it and I'm going to invite everyone to join. It's like, no, let's just discuss about it. What are you trying to solve by introducing this new technology? And do we all agree that we're going to try it out for a time, and then if it doesn't work, we'll try a new one? So that's a way of going about it.
And I also think, to your earlier point about where's the fences and where's the watering holes. I think in our organization there's a thirst for more knowledge, and our thought leaders are kind of those watering holes. So like we all go to the debrief every Wednesday at this specific time for multiple years now. It seems like maybe more than 1 year, because that's where our leaders are like, hey, you can talk to us here. This is where we'll be, watering hole. Come, let's talk. So if we can experiment with degrees of our leadership group on specific tools, and then say, hey, this is working for the people that have the influence. I can't remember how it was described in the earlier one. Then that might be a way of doing that migration naturally.
Definitely. And we can show again one of the workflows for meetings that might be useful.
I'm eager to hear from Ian.
Yeah, Richard, yesterday you brought up the difference between members and contributors, and I'd love to hear some stories about I told you before, I'm on the board of our chain. So we have, like Bill was saying, almost 1,500 members, and we have a very small minority of very activist members, and it's a real balancing act where the board is fiduciarily responsible for all of the members, but we only have just a small minority who are doing most of the engagement and pushing. So any advice you have in that direction? Yeah.
Identifying who the actual groups are. Like if they're all called members, but there's obviously two very distinct classes, there should be two names for them. I really believe that. Making it transparent. I'll send you another document where we lay out precisely what are the rights and responsibilities of contributors and members, and it's just making that transparent. And because everyone knows it, at some level everyone can see that this is happening, but if there's no way of specifically addressing these activist members, then it's kind of like you're always talking to a void, or there's this elephant in the room where you can't quite get at the point you're trying to get at.
And there's no accountability for that group, and there's no pathway for people that actually wants to join it. So we'll send you some of those infos.
At a baseline, what we have is any member can invite new contributors. So as in, I'm a member of Inspiral. I met Nati. I think you've got great values and you'll fit in here. I can invite you in. But for Nati to become a member, she needs 75% consensus of the members. So there's a very low barrier to come in, but then a very high barrier to attain that level of responsibility. So you can do something like that, that there's a transparent pathway to climb, that people realize that, I actually have to put in a lot of effort if I expect to have the same degree of influence as these other people.
Yeah, we've got something similar in Lumia with, it takes at least a year before a worker in Lumia would be invited to become a member. But giving space for those conversations. I think back to the watering hole analogy, if people find that, and back to the tool, if people find that this is where the work is taking place, this is where decisions are happening, this is where I can find the minutes of that meeting, this is where I can find information, or, it really comes down to practice and demonstrating that if you're looking for this kind of information, this kind of work, this kind of decision, come here.
Yeah. We've got 20 minutes on the clock. I wonder if we want to just keep this conversation rolling or switch gears and think about conflict.
Yeah, I have one more question as it relates to onboarding. Is any of your guys' process automated? Do you have any automation?
Yeah, and in Spiral, they have tons of automation. I don't know how they do it. We've got an ops team that is just fanatical about automating everything. Yeah. So I can make an introduction, and that you can have a chat with them and see what they do. I don't understand it.
There's so many Google Forms involved.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I might have to bring some people into that conversation too to help me understand.
So good.
Yeah, we can link that.
Cool, that'd be great. Nice. Okay, yeah. If anybody else doesn't have any other questions, then it would be great to move over to the conflict resolution.
We can do a good intro in 20 minutes anyway, so even in 10 minutes. I'll share screen again because we've got a cool, fancy diagram. Let's see. Do you want to talk about it?
You can share it.
Okay. So
Fits in.
the escalation pyramid. Again, this is like something that we constructed over time out of our experience. Our whole co-op is full of people that are just allergic to any kind of structure. So we had to, build this experimentally piece by piece by piece. But at the base of this pyramid, at the sort of everyday level, is our resources and our practices. So we've done, in different groups, we've done various kinds of trainings to support people into habits of healthy communication. So some of you might know nonviolent communication. It's like a specific way of delivering feedback to each other. There's a tool that might be really helpful in your context called the Blueprint of We, where, again, I can send this through. Basically, before you start a new collaboration, like maybe you're forming a project team with 5 people, you get together and answer these questions about yourself, which are like, how do I respond under stress? What do I, if I'm stressed out, what do I need? What do I look like when I'm really having a good time? There's basically a simple survey, and you get to see like, oh, well, this person, if they're having a difficult time, what they need is space, whereas this person needs a lot of reassurance and affection or something like that. Like getting to understand, well, hey, we're all different, and making explicit. I mean, this is just the recurring. The one pattern of decentralized organizing, talk about your problems and making everything explicit. So that's our baseline. And I mean, I should put agreements in there too, like when you join this team, you are agreeing to certain standards of behavior. That's all in there as well. It's like, there's a baseline.
Yeah, the norms and boundaries that we were talking about yesterday is the base.
Yeah, and we can go deeper on some of these practices if that's helpful. But then next up is, what we're aiming for is that everyone can just communicate with each other directly. Like, hey, what you did before really upset me. Can we talk about it? That's what you want to be in that situation, but there's tons of reasons why that doesn't happen sometimes. And so if that one-to-one conversation is not appropriate, or you try it and it just doesn't go well, that's when we call in the stewards, or whatever you want to call your peers, someone who is doesn't have any authority but knows you well and can hold, like, oh, Michael, I'm having this challenge here. Can you host a conversation for the 2 of us? And time again, just having a third person in the room shifts the dynamic. You're a little bit more self-aware, and you're a little bit less caught up in your rage and pain and more like measured. And then if that doesn't work, if you can't get to some resolution with that conversation, then in our case, we'll have a specialist team. In your case, it might just be HR, but just a next level of authority, a next level of expertise as well. People that we'd expect people in that team to have training in mediation and resolution. And then if that doesn't work, then we call in an external mediator. And we've actually got a list of external mediators that we've agreed ahead of time, so that, in the worst case, and we've had to call this in once or twice, I think. We've had something that's just been something that's really stuck, and a Lumia too, where there's been issues that have been really deeply stuck, and they've been just festering for 2 years, and we've made little nibbles at it, but we've never cracked it. We get an external mediator, and that's thankfully for us, that's always worked. We've never had to go to court, which is like, and then of course, if your external mediation doesn't even work, then we have the final trigger, which is like, well, obviously our system doesn't work. There's something wrong here, and at that point, it'd be an emergency really, and we'd call in the board and say, hey, we've failed. We need some support. So that's the model we carry around in our head, and I think just from there we can take questions on if there's any parts you want to go deeper into. You can talk a bit about NBC if you want.
I had a question. What's the blueprint of we?
Yeah, so it's a template survey that you're filling in that saying, this is me, this is my characteristics, this is how I want to participate. And every person you do this for like a small collaboration, you wouldn't get everyone to do this all at once, but before we start working on this, we use this as a way to have a conversation about how are we going to collaborate, and defining our own terms that are only relevant within this small group.
There's a few tools like that there is basically just to get to know the other person a little bit more, and to understand, what are their trigger points, how how do they respond under stress? What do they need? So that's the kind of thing that you want to see. There's a few different exercises that we play when we're in workshops as well about this. That is just to understand that different people react in a different way in those circumstances, and how to be a little bit more understanding and supportive.
I guess a best practice thing from bigger organizations working this way. Once you want to step in, to whatever level of commitment, whatever that role is called, but once you're stepping over the threshold, a lot of them will have an expectation that you are going through some kind of training at that point. So it's really common to have a nonviolent communication training there, or a consensus training, or a mediation training. There's specific kind of to signal, hey, there's particular competencies that are expected of you if you're going to be participating at this level. And we don't expect that everyone's born with this stuff. It's just skills that you have to pick up, and we take people through those.
There's a few really good online courses and talks and resources. There's a lot of stuff available. There's something that is called conflict transformation instead of mediation or resolution, and that one is really interesting as well. There's some free resources to look at.
And this, I think, the leadership plays such a big role in this. Like having people in leadership positions able to disagree with each other peacefully, respectfully, in the open, and be like, what you did there, I think, was out of line, and being able to demonstrate all that stuff. That's if people see the leadership as being kind of closed off and unopen to feedback, and then that's what they'll model. They don't feel safe to be open either. So it really this is one of the parts that really needs to come from the top.
Yeah, your pyramid was very familiar to me. Yeah. It's a similar model.
Yeah, we built it from first principles, but it came to the same result.
Yeah. So it was very familiar. It's good.
I like to see it more as steps than a pyramid, just because of the shape.
The conflict cigarette.
Or a spiral. Yeah, I often think being explicit and understanding that there is, you would know the old phases of going through any group formation, of team formation, of the forming, storming, norming, performing, as they say. And I see that so often. But we've also noticed that even one new member changing, in a group, can actually get you back through that cycle again. It's hopefully a lot quicker and a lot less painful than it was the first time. But it is a process of getting to know each other, and then how, when things pop up, how to deal with that.
I think the shared ownership has made a big difference too. Like for us, it's always been at least 80% of the workers own the company. So you have this shared sense of like, well, we've both invested in this, and that having that very explicit shared investment in a collective aim. It's not me. It's not about me and my ego and how I want to be the best. It's actually about, we're all working on this thing. I think that's really helped keep the conflict down.
Yeah, and there's something I was just thinking actually even below your pyramid there, which is shared values, alignment, and around the purpose and the vision. Because there's so many times in conflict, it's not actually personal conflict. It's more a situation of we both see different paths, but we're actually kind of all heading in the same direction. So the invitation is to connect back to that shared purpose and values, and then look at actually how we're implementing it, and recognize that the other person's taking maybe a different approach.
We go for long walks. That's a pretty good conflict resolution process.
Yeah, walks. And we haven't mentioned retreats or...
we talked a bit about that yesterday. I think all that time together is like where you actually form these deep bonds. And when you've got deep bonds, then you can handle the tensions that come up. Because, we have this deep connection. So this little frustration about the marketing or about what programming decision you made is like a lot easier to deal with.
And also, if I'm invested in our relationship, a small conflict, it's way minor. It's not about I need my voice to be heard, I need my idea to be the priority. It's more about I care about you and you care about me, so how can we solve this? How can we find a space in between? So we have 10 minutes left. Is there anyone else that has any questions? Anything else you'd like us to go deeper into?
I'm going to +1 that book, Getting to Yes.
There's also another book that is called Sitting in the Fire that is very useful for conflict and in organizations that are trying to be collective and collaborative.
You can jump in.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because I kind of want to switch it a little bit, the topic, if nobody else has questions specific to conflict.
It looks like Kit wants to jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Kit.
Well, it's not specifically about that. I just wanted to say that yesterday I asked a question about how you guys make your norms and boundaries explicit. And we talked about it a bit, and you said you'd send me a link, so I wanted to remind you of that.
I've noted it down. I already have it. Yeah.
We're going to have like a big email follow-up with all the things that we say we're going to send you. So
Great. Over to you, Patrick.
Thanks for that, Kit. Anybody else on the topic or off topic? Okay. All right. So I actually just wanted to turn it over to you guys. And like, I know we've had Michael, we had a conversation, and Rich and Nati, we've had a conversation before, but what, if you don't mind sharing with the group, like your aspirations and intentions for Lumio in the coming years and Spiral, as well as the Hum, I think that would help us get context as we grow our organization as well.
Sure.
You can do Lumia. You can do the Hum, and I'll do Spiral.
All right, cool. Sounds good. So Lumia has been, we set up deliberately as a social enterprise, as a work-owned cooperative with the shared values around enabling people wherever they are to be involved in decisions that affect them. So at the heart of what we're trying to do is build a software product that can be in the hands of people wherever they are, and allow them to organize their own lives, their own workplaces, their own government, to participate and be involved. So that's just what's driving us behind that. Now, of course, what's also important is building a financially successful and sustainable company to continue to grow. And just another thing, on that area, we made a call very early on not to put advertising in the product, and not to sell people's data. That data privacy and personal data is very important. So we blocked off a bunch of, I suppose, traditional business models that are often used in the software space. So we've taken a pretty high ground, I suppose, on building that, and we've, over the last sort of 5 to 6 years, have gone from a beta product into a working scalable product. And over the last couple of years, we've been figuring and really working on our business model and on a good product market fit, finding that we started, if you like, from a place where we were in a deep working with people who were already practicing deep collaboration. And now more and more we're working with people who are collaborating, but in the day-to-day work that they need to do, just simply making decisions between meetings. So what we're trying to do now is we're the Lumia approach to this is not one of revolution, it's more of evolution. It's actually helping people where they are in the place that they are to be able to collaborate more together and make good decisions. So that's kind of where we are now. We've built a software as a service business on top of our open source software. And we're pretty excited about where the next stages are and to grow, and particularly interested in what blockchain has to offer from a technology perspective. So very quickly, we are looking to, our next key stage is to develop a mobile app. Now we've figured the product actually that's working and got good confidence in that product. Build a mobile app to be able to extend the accessibility. We're interested in, and we had a link the other day to Alex at LifeID. Very keen to connect with LifeID about the potential of authenticating people and the comments and discussions that are taking place. And then the next stage that we foresee would be beginning to write our database our database or our data into the blockchain space in parallel with the centralized database that we have today, and perhaps ultimately at some point moving the database to a decentralized blockchain. So that's just a really, top level summary. Much more I could talk about, but one last thing I would say is that our key markets right now are, we have a lot of community groups, and we have a community offer and a sponsored rate for communities. These are unfunded community groups. We have a product that is used by businesses and by non-profits, so pricing for that. And then we're used increasingly by government as well. So, those sort of four market really areas is government, business, non-profits, and unfunded community groups, and a range of product that we can support under that. Cool.
Thank you.
That was Lumia.
Okay, so for the ham, so we basically started the ham with Reach because what we noticed increasingly was a lot of group coming to use Lumia because they want to collaborate more, but reality is that they use the tool without actually having all the cultural practices or systems and structures of support in their organization. So then they fail to use Lumia, but because they're actually failing to collaborate, and they don't realize that layer. They think that, oh, well, it's a problem with the technology. Let's just bring a new platform and it will be solved. So we started giving these talks last year and workshops on collaboration, and what actually are the basis for a collaborative, decentralized organization, and sharing all these principles that we're doing. So for me, my desire for the ham is that we can keep on doing this and keep on supporting groups to actually learn how to collaborate and how to have a hamming team. That's what our name came from, because we keep on using that phrase. So this year we're going back to Europe in actually less than a week. We're going to be there for like around 6 months, giving masterclass, like full day events, and going to a bunch of conferences and meeting with even more groups and more people doing these kind of things. We're going to host a few retreats for organizations as well to go a little bit deeper into the stuff.
Yeah.
So we're going to just keep on growing a little bit this year, and hopefully next year we can start bringing more team members as well.
Lumia's constitution is set up in a way where there's a requirement that we spend some fraction of our profits on social impact work. And so I imagine the hum basically working with a lot of community groups and social movements being funded by Lumia to go and support them and not have to charge them.
Yeah, well, we already do it, right? Like we get sponsorship from big organizations that can afford it to pay for a workshop, and then we can give a free workshop for a community group or work with a social group like the ones in Argentina working in Islam to improve the quality of life. Like we do those kind of work for free.
And then the Inspiral thing, really there was a whole phase of people wanting to join Inspiral, and now we're very distinctly in a new phase, which is more about helping other people start their, entrepreneurial cooperative networks. And that's much more my interest now, is people who are starting. It feels like our chain in a sense is heading in that direction. And there's a few of them popping up around the world where people are not just experimenting with different organizational form, but also trying to do something very meaningful, trying to work on stuff that feels very important. That's not just about making a ton of money. And we've got a whole network of our more experienced Inspiral people now quite actively cross-pollinating and supporting those networks. So it's quite intentional that we're on this call with you. I think we're trying to weave together at the edges and share DNA. It's been an evolution process within Inspiral, and to now start to identify 10 or 15 other siblings that are also evolving, and that we can learn from each other's pitfalls and not be so, it's quite risky what we're doing, we're experimenting on all fronts all at once. So it's still conceivable that Inspiral would just collapse next year. So if we're in a community with many others around us, I think it's going to be less likely that we're all going to die. That sounded really doomy. It was really dark.
For the end.
I would say it's been critical to Lumia's success.
Yeah. Inspiral, the flavor of the month at the moment is 200 groups, like 200 collectives of 200 people. That's what we're striving for, and I think we're up to about 15. Kate, you're trying to jump in again.
Yeah, well, you guys mentioned you're coming to Europe, and
It's in the early formative stages, but our chain is going to have a presence, meeting a headquarters of some sort in Berlin. That's coming together now. And there will probably be a launch sometime in August. So depending on your schedule, we might be able to work something out and see each other, and maybe even organize a workshop, in which case we would have to import Ian and Patrick and Jason over to Europe. You know, that's they couldn't possibly miss that.
Right. Well, we are already planning on being in Berlin around mid-September, so we can start coordinating something about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we actually got the dates in our debrief. I think it's September 4th, or 3rd or 4th is when that's actually being planned, Kit. But it's actually early September. Is the
third to 6th.
3rd to 6th. There you go. Thank you, Ian.
3rd to 6th.
We can move around a little bit.
Yeah,
We'll be in Germany.
I would say the difference between a lecture and a participatory immersive experience is that, it's just, you just go 10 times further when you've got all the participatory stuff. Like, it's nice that we're all stimulating each other's brains, but
we're not actually practicing much.
In the practice, it goes a lot deeper than that. So we really love doing those workshop bits.
Or hosting, like being the external facilitators for your retreat or whatever gathering you're having. Just having that external people that, you know, they're not that invested in the politics, this makes a huge change.
And you also mentioned that you have special deals for open source or community organizations. Do you have such a thing for other cooperatives?
Yeah, typically co-ops right now, those that are forming. So first of all, on our Lumia page, if you go to the pricing section, you'll see the different pricing. There's two basic plans. One's a gold and one's a pro, depending on the size of the co-op or the group. And then we invite, if it's a non-profit co-op, you know, there's a discount there. And if it's an unfunded or a very early stage group, we just invite people to fill out a community application form and just tell us a little bit about what they're doing. And we get, I've got a lot of I was showing Rich yesterday, you know, there's a couple of groups in the Midwest of the US that are building a co-op around wool dyeing, and another one and hides and so forth. It's just, you know, fascinating to see that. So we don't turn anybody away. So just, you know, the aim is really to enable people to easily upgrade their group and use it. And of course that helps to fund us. And at the same time to make it accessible to groups and to provide a price. And in some situations, for example, in Venezuela and other areas where even $9 a month is too much, people, you know, will do that. We'll do an upgrade for free.
That's nice.
We haven't specifically got a co-ops deal, but maybe we should.
Well, I would say my default would be it's probably non-profit to start with, but
just have the special co-ops button there.
Yeah.
Special co-ops button, yeah, cool.
We'll call it that, special. Anyhow.
We're over time.
Yeah, we're over time. We have a bunch of resources to send you, so we'll do that after the call. And we'll also send the recording of this call. And, you know, you can always reach us and ask us anything. Fine.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Nice to see you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll be following up.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Lovely to see you.
Bye.